So first of all, I want to thank Denise and the organizers at Silicon Valley Forum for inviting me, including me in this festival. I was here all day yesterday and all day here since this morning, hearing all of the pitches, the stories, the advice from all of these founders, the panels. You guys have all been just amazing and inspiring, so thank you for that. I always welcome an opportunity to talk about orchids. Now I think I understand why Melanie is having problems with this one. Maybe we need batteries? I want to see a show of hands here of anybody who's an orchid grower. Wow, there's like non-zero numbers. That's awesome. That's not usually my experience, so thank you. Keep your hands up. Who here has ever received an orchid as a present or bought one? All right, so that's good. Keep it up, keep it up. Who here has eaten something that's flavored with vanilla? You guys are all orchid fanatics, whether you admit it or not. So let me just admit that, okay, this is a problem, that unlike most of the people you meet, I work to support my orchid habit. I'm that weird person who, during the holidays, instead of giving out chocolates, wine, candy, cookies, I give people orchids. And their reactions is like, oh my God, it's gorgeous. And then, I can't swear. So, oh no, I'm gonna kill it. That's usually the reaction. So my children's gifts to their teachers always included a blooming orchids. I'm the weird person, and I'm sure that security videos have recorded me going around, rescuing all of the struggling orchids, bringing them home with me, putting them in the ICU section in my greenhouse until they've recovered enough so I can give them back. Sometimes when I have an amazing plant that's in bloom, I take it to work. I take it to all my meetings, and my days is usually 9 to about 7 meetings, back-to-back meetings. My coworkers have actually stopped making comments or asking questions. They kind of just look at me and said, yeah, there she goes again, the weird orchid lady. So after spending years of my adult life growing orchids, I can tell you, I can draw parallels between orchid growing and pretty much anything. Life, business, anything. And I'm just hoping that I can share some of those lessons with you today. When we think of orchids, they have this reputation of being rare, exotic, glamorous, but they don't always start out that way. As a grower, I buy my orchids from orchid shows or online. This is how they come. This is how they come. They don't look so glamorous. They usually bare root, a little beat up through transit, wrapped in a piece of newspaper. And that's how they arrive. Well, the fact that I pay a lot of money for them besides. So it's similar to people, We meet a lot of our team members and we make preconceived notions about them, and sometimes it's real and sometimes it's not real. So we all have to start from somewhere. When we think about orchids, the first image, usually, most of the time, we think of this mass-produced, ubiquitous moth orchids or phalaenopsis that you get at Trader Joe's or Home Depot. But in reality, there are actually 30,000 orchid species and over 100 hybrids, new ones being discovered and created all the time. They grow underground, they grow on rocks, they grow in soil. They have flowers that are smaller than a dime, and they have flowers that are measured in feet. They can be found in every continent except Antarctica. I wouldn't be found in Antarctica either, so I don't blame the orchids for that. But that's what makes them unique and different. It's the same thing with people. We're all unique and different, right? All day long, we've heard about this. Look at the person next to you. Every person in this room, we have our own life stories, we have our experiences, we have our own biases that make us who we are. We're unique, we're different. Whether you work for a small company or startup or a large corporation. People development is the key to the company's success. There are a lot of parallels between orchid growing and people development. For example, if your orchid has like an amazing root structure, it's really healthy, you can almost always count on it producing lots of beautiful and amazing flowers. It's the same thing with people development. It takes culture, care, and authenticity to build a strong and high-performing team. Culture. We hear a lot about this word in corporate world, but it's funny because this is the word we use all the time in orchid growing. The difference between an orchid killer and an orchid grower is somebody who actually knows the natural habitat of your orchids and the growing environment. Think about that. Think about the parallel in that between a team builder and a team killer, not literally, or maybe literally, is somebody who actually cares, right? You care because we're all unique and different. So if you care enough to get to know your team members, their priorities, where they are in life, in their career, their motivations, their strengths, and then you put them in a role that's best fit their culture, your chances of success is way higher than trying to shove a square peg in the round hole and pray that something good is going to come out of it. And then you have to create the sense of purpose. Most of us don't wake up in the morning saying, you know, I think I'll just kind of like drift through life. I believe most of us actually want to make an impact. Most of us want to make a difference. So clearly articulate that sense of purpose and obsess about fairness and accountability. We've heard a lot about diversity and the importance of diversity. Every one of us is unique and different. Create an environment where your team is actually not afraid to raise their hands and say, wait, I have a different point of view, right? This is what I can bring to the table. Wait, there's a problem over here, and bring up issues and make mistakes. The value of diversity is not just in having this perfect world, but having your team, whether you're hiring your team members or instill that culture where people invite and embrace different, right? Having chosen engineering as my career, I am so used to being the single, the only in everything. But if I have not been given the opportunity to bring what's different, what I have to bring in, then I would not have been successful. Care. Most of the time, orchids die because you overwater. Most of the time. When you go on vacation and then you leave your orchid dry and in an unheated house and you come home 3 weeks later, you're shocked your plant died. It's like, it's a living thing. If you don't care for it, it ain't gonna live, okay? Same thing with people. Care enough to give them the development opportunities for them to be fantastic in their job, whether it's this mentor, whether it's a buddy, whether it's a new skill set, but care enough to do that. Care enough to give them feedback, the gift of feedback. We heard a lot about this today. Be authentic. I work with a lot of people who are so, and I am also guilty of that, and so I want you to think about that. When was the last time you actually took the time to give people the gift of feedback? Whether it's like, wow, you did that amazing job, or that, if you just do this, you will have better results. Just have that authentic conversation with people, right? Care enough to champion somebody's cause. I was just on a panel a couple of weeks ago, and I said, I have never in my career had a woman take me by the hand and said, Mary, you have high potential. Let me help you. Let me help you get to where you can be. So that's kind of like become my mission in life. I want to be that champion for women, for the underdogs, for the underrepresented. But you don't need to be somebody high up in corporations or some important person or be really wealthy. Just take action today. Take the time to meet somebody in network. Give them a piece of advice. Help them. We are all capable of giving our time, our advice, our experience to help somebody. So go help to champion somebody's cause. And for God's sake, don't micromanage. Seriously, I think we've all suffered from the micromanagement syndrome. Being micromanaged or micromanage somebody, it's never pretty. It's usually just really bad news. So don't do that. And then step back and watch your team blossom. Authenticity. It's really funny, having growing orchids for years. Sometimes they die, shockingly enough. And then after I go through my 5 stages of grief, I accept that maybe I did something wrong. And then I try to do better with the next plant. It's the same thing in the business world. Things don't always go smoothly, especially if you're in startups. It goes bumpy, whether you're trying to raise funds or anything. And then priority shifts and change, and your team's kind of like having this whiplash. When that happens, talk to them. Be authentic. Be honest. Be open about what's happening. And tell them the reason. Always tell people why. That is really important. And then sometimes, and I'm experiencing this personally with my team, sometimes we experiencing very, very challenging global or macro conditions that are outside of our control. That's when you really need, I think, authentic communication really comes in. Is really important because you need to talk to your team. You need to tell them what's happening and then decide as a team what we can do locally. You can't control the global environment or the macro environment. So what can we do locally to make the team feel engaged? Right? Sometimes it's just a silly little thing. I did recently, I did a succulent terrarium in a high-tech company. And then we thought, okay, maybe we can get a couple of hundred people to participate. Maybe if we really push hard, 400 people showed up. I'm like, oh my God, how many trips to dollar store do I have to run to get the glass terrarium? So sometimes it's just that little thing that costs you very little, and it gives people the group hug that they need, right? And so just always be honest, be authentic. Nobody's perfect. Nobody expects perfection. We're all adults here. But what we do expect is honest, authentic, transparency, and integrity. When you work really hard, and like I work really hard in giving my orchids the care, and I understand what this particular plant needs, and I'm kind of really honest about the effort I give it, I get this. I get this amazing, rare, exotic results. So when you give your team, you understand what your team needs, and you give them that sense of purpose, and you create an environment where they can thrive and make decisions for themselves, they will surprise you with the impact that nor they even thought possible. It's like they surprise you all the time when you give them all of the support structure and the environment where they can make decisions for themselves. They have that strong sense of purpose. It's amazing. In orchids, there's an award that I think all serious growers really covet. I've never received it. I've submitted a lot of my plants to orchid judging. And the award is called the Certificate of Cultural Excellence. It's given out to very, very few growers. And what that means when you receive it is you've done just the best thing that you can for your plant. And it grows and it thrives like amazing. So when you give your team the sense of purpose and you give them the right environment to thrive, and you're honest and you're transparent, then maybe your effort and their effort will become this Certificate of Cultural Excellence. Thank you.